Bella raga, sto per intervistare Sebastian Lanser, ex OBSCURA, ora suona nel suo progetto chiamato OBSIDIOUS ed è un batterista che spazia da qualsiasi genere immaginabile. Jazz, progressive rock, metal, death metal estremissimo, blast beat e doppia cassa a velocità fuori di testa. Sono stracarico di fare questo video, ringrazio Michele Soglia per avermi dato il contatto di Sebastian. L'intervista per ovvi motivi sarà in inglese, ma metterò i sottotitoli ovunque. Partiamo subito con l'intervista. Hi Sebastian, it's a big pleasure to be here with you. It's I don't know, like 7 to 8 years I know you. And I know you from Obscura, and then I discovered that you also can play like every kind of music. Let's start talking about your background. When did you start playing the drums? What was your first approach with the drums in general?
Hi, Dario. Thanks for the invitation. And first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, to answer your question, I started play drums at the age of 5. So I grew up in a musical household. My father is a guitarist, and actually he bought me a drum kit when I was 5. So I remember me and him going to the music store, local music store, buying a 5-piece drum kit. So there it basically all started. My father, as I said, is a guitar player, and he played in a bunch of local bands. So I had the chance to watch him play at rehearsals and watch the drummer play from early on. And so a little bit later, when I was around 8, I started to play in his band because like one of the drummers couldn't play for some reason. I don't remember. I had the chance to sit in and play with them. It was just pretty straightforward rock blues, and I still play with him up to this. Yeah, like yeah, we don't play very often, but like 2, 3 times a year we have some gigs. Actually, everything started with the Beatles. That kind of stuff, but um, also a lot of blues stuff and also jazz. And he listened to players that combined different genres. Also, like I don't know if you know Robin Ford, the Robin Ford blues band is a guitar player, but so I got in touch with other genres, other styles. Um, and that's how I also developed like an ear for that kind of music, because like so that was actually first, and a little bit later some friends of mine started to listening to Metallica and Slayer and that heavy stuff, so that had a pretty huge big impact on me as well.
Did you go to a teacher to learn to play jazz or blues? Were
Yeah,
you?
yeah, I got my first teacher when I was 8.
Oh, okay. So you
Yeah.
always went to music school or drum teachers?
I never went to music school.
Okay.
I always had private lessons. So I started when I was 5 on my own, playing on my own. I was playing regularly, so it was I pretty was influenced by the drum virus from very early on, because I was very fascinated by that instrument. So I played almost every day, and I had like the chance to play uh, and watch bands from early on. So that's where I picked up a lot and learned a lot. But I also had the chance to take lessons. I was about 8 years, and I was a local teacher. Was a very good teacher. Yeah, and that's where I first got in touch with rudiments.
When did you make, I don't know, the mentality switch? I think you had some period where you just practice for, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours a day. I think. I see you're playing and I see many hours of practice. So when did it start?
That's a good question. I always like I love playing drums. I love practicing really up to this day. I have to say, whenever I have the chance, I don't practice that much as it was before, because like today, um, I have my studio and I do a lot of session work. uh, I do 2-day intense courses at my studio, and this takes up a lot of time. So since I'm recording a lot of stuff, also I need to prepare for that recordings, and I don't call like preparing practicing, so it's not the same. But I still take time to practice, and I would say today it's between 2 hours and yeah, whatever I can. Maybe I like it's between two, and if it's a lot, then it's still 5 hours or something I spend. But back then I was just in the basement of my parents. I was there the whole day.
Oh, but practicing or just playing?
Yeah. Like the discipline of sitting there and practicing stuff came a little bit later, to be honest. You know, at some point I recognized, like, it's since like the beginning for me, it came pretty easy for me, like doing like basic drum coordination and grooving along to a song. Felt quite easy, but like going to the next step and working on technical things or working on like um, came a little bit later, like having the inner urge to develop towards a musical goal. Besides that, I think that's a really important thing to have whenever you practice, to have a musical goal, like a vision where you want to develop towards. Um, and so back then it always have been music. So I've been in touch with other musicians, with bands, and there was like, I mean, I started playing double bass, for example, pretty early, because my father, he was in California, and he brought me my first double pedal when I was, I can remember, 8 or 10, something in that. So pretty early, and I started playing double bass and listening to that kind of music where double bass has a lot of breakthrough in heavy music, like like metal. When I probably Metallica, also Slayer was very intense stuff for me back then. Very fast and single strokes, and so I got in touch with that and didn't know anything about technique. I just started with, you know, full leg motion, stomping, that typical, you
Sweating
know,
so much.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it kind of developed in a natural way, and so um, and it everything worked out fine. Um, it was always really important for me to work for the sound you want to get. You know, if you look for a heavy, consistent sound, you have to hit the way. Drums need to be hit harder. If for example a snare sound, um, doing rim shots, um, if you want to get that sound and like being really consistent with it, especially when you do a lot of recording with foot technique, it also the same way. So if it has to be loud and consistent, you have to hit that way. That approach worked until I started to play extreme metal. Whenever that interest for extreme metal arrived in my life. Back then, I probably was somewhere in my 20s. I saw actually pretty late. So I was studying music at university here in Austria, when I was in my early 20s. So, and around that time, it was of course metal, but I listened to a lot of different styles and played a lot of different styles like jazz. I also had a huge interest in fusion and like players from that period, and like Vinny Colaiuta, Tony Williams actually was the bridge for me. So that stuff, and it was really important for me. And later I got the chance, directly after I finished like university, I got the offer to play in a band called Panzer Ballet, which
Yeah,
is
which
in,
you're still playing with them, don't you?
actually I quit playing there when in 2018.
Okay.
Back in the last 2-3 years, I did some gigs occasionally, jumping in for someone else, but I'm not officially playing with them. So Virgil is playing with them right now.
What was the first drummer that showed you like blast beats or very extreme stuff?
I haven't had a teacher or something that got me in touch with the music, or with the type of playing. I can remember I didn't get in touch with the type of playing through the music or through listening to music. I got in touch with that style because I opened up YouTube one day, and how it all started was actually um, George and Derek. So I saw videos of them playing. It popped up on my feed, and I was fascinated by the speed and like foot technique, how they are able to play as fast and powerful. And I was just blown away by the physical ability of like a human being able to do that. that that was more. So it was,
Like more a
pretty,
challenge.
yeah, pretty big part of that whole fascination was physical part of it. So it all started from there. I like it was from that day on. I It was somehow in my point of interest, always checking out what those kind of players are practicing, how what type of stuff they play, what kind of vocabulary they are using in their music, like in their way of playing, what kind of course, if we talk technique, they use single strokes. It's the main rudiment, of course, but it's not about what rudiment, it's about how they use the single. So it's about how they play, it's about how they are able to reach a certain tempo and stay there for a longer period of time. How? So it's the how which is important, because there are a lot of books, there are a lot of videos. Back then there were DVDs. There's not a single information on the how.
Okay. Yeah,
So
that's true.
I kind of had to figure that out by myself, as so many other players.
How long was the period of time? I don't know. You sat down with the bass drum or with the kick pad, and for how long was your goal to stay at a certain tempo?
If you take a routine, we have like endurance, which is important. I think it's the most important thing. And then you have like speed workouts, like having burst orientated
Okay.
workouts. So, and the important thing is to combine those two in a routine, and find the right amount of time for each. And that's very individual. But for me, it took time to figure that out. And I started by doing 90 minutes of single strokes with my feet, for example.
Did I hear 90
90 minutes, yeah, 1.5 hours
non-stop?
of consecutive single stroke nonstop. And I tell you what, this is because I heard and I read that in one of Mike Mangini's books. So, like I knew that master a skill, you need a lot of repetition. What I didn't understand back then was repetition is nothing if you don't program the right movement into the muscle memory. If you do just long periods of time, but doing wrong movements, it's equal to don't practice. I think it's even worse, because programming something wrong into your muscle memory is not what we want.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
So 90 minutes, he came around with that number, and I thought, "Yeah, I have to do it." But from today, it's really about the technique. It doesn't make sense to practice a new technique that you start out doing, like I call it the swivel technique.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
You can't just start doing 90 consecutive minutes from scratch,
Yeah,
because
it
you
makes
don't
sense.
have any muscle memory. It doesn't make any sense at all. So I had to learn that. There are a lot of young players starting out having, like the inner urge, and like they have a lot of motivation, want to start with something new, and they want to, they think like they can master the desired technique in short time if they practice just huge amounts of hours. But according to technique, this doesn't work, because this is a physical thing. There are muscles involved. If you just practice too much, you will burn out quickly, and the progression curve will go down instead of up. And that's what happens to a lot of young players, including me. So my advice is just to take it easy, like check out the exact movement, check out how it works, and then take little steps. So that's how I did, and I still, up to this day, do it. I just had a phone call with my bass player. We talked about practicing in a musician's life, and I said today is still maintenance work. In order to be able to record all the stuff I get requested, which is let's say at least 50% metal to extreme metal. There's a lot of fast double bass in it, and all that, and I have to keep that skill. So also, if I get like in between, I probably get recording requests that don't require me to play fast. So
Okay.
it's probably like some softer stuff, and like fusiony stuff, like, or even pop rock straight ahead. So I don't need those skills at all, but I still need to maintain that skill. So I need to sit down. The first thing I usually do in the morning when I get up is take a shower, like drink a coffee, and do maintenance on my pads. And I sit down and do like probably an hour, hour and a half.
So you use also the
Yeah,
mirror in front of you.
yeah, always.
Okay, so you think it's very important, the mirror in front of you.
Practice with a mirror, it's really helpful. You can watch yourself in real time. So for me, the visual aspect is really important. I use it in my teaching all the time, because I think if it looks right, then there's a huge chance that it also feels right, and vice versa. So these are two things, like the visual aspect and also the feel. So there's also in sports, there is a connection. So they call it like muscle mind connection. For me, it's really important. So always to connect. Also practice with the mirrors, but also close your eyes and connect to the used muscle groups.
That's a very big piece of advice you gave. How much do you think talent compared to practice makes the difference in drums?
There's nothing that beats practice. There's a book, it's called Talent is Overrated. But to be honest, I think talent is nothing if you don't practice, because there may be things that come easy to you. But like talking for myself, making a living as a musician, there are so many skills, and it doesn't get easier. If you want to be, get better at what you're doing, and reach certain goals, you have to practice, you have to learn. For me, studio work, it's not only the way I play. A big part of it is actually how I play, but there is also technical side behind that. If I don't use my time and learn about the technical aspects of how I mic the drum kit.
So do you even produce your own sound? Do you mix your own sound?
I actually started to develop very big interest in
Okay.
that kind of world, and because I do a lot of studio work and I love doing that, and I started to mix.
The next natural question is, which are the side skills that a drummer in 2024 should learn? to become a professional drummer?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. It depends on what you want to do. Do you want to play in a band? Do you want to tour with a band? Do you want to be on your own? I mean, do you want to like teach and how about teaching philosophy and want to share that with the world? It's so diverse. It depends, but for sure, there are some skills that are, I don't want to say crucial, but it's great if you have a knowledge of video recording and have some gear and being knowledgeable with video software. Also, audio recording, have a DAW. I work with Cubase since I'm a teenager. So I started working with Cubase when I was 14, and I didn't change that up to this day.
Yeah, same to me.
I had to get into video recording, but because I didn't have that big interest in that kind of thing until later. So because it kind of was a must to develop an interest for those kinds of things, because it's just required. Not only because of social media, there are also a bunch of clients that want me to record the recording session. So it's just required. I think reading music is kind of underrated today. I think a lot of young guys that like approach me for lessons, they don't read usually. I think that's quite important because it can save you a lot of time. It's very efficient. If you're into more complex type of stuff, like multi-dimensional in a rhythmical way, so talking of polyrhythms and polymeters, you can write that stuff down and visualize it in that way. So it's much easier to understand stuff that way. And also for me, I'm a pretty visual guy. So when I learn songs, I usually like to read the stuff, and I learn much faster that way. So if I one time have the chance to go through a piece by reading it, I always imagine that picture.
What do you think is the best technique for speed meta in the bass drum?
There's no best.
There's no best. Okay.
No, I think there's no best. But I think the best solution is to work on a bunch of different techniques that do the job for you. I tell you why. I made the experience, just one skill is fine, but if you're on a tour, playing every day for 6 weeks, all of a sudden you're so burned out for some reason that the skill you're using all the time is not working. Okay, for any reason you can't figure out why. I tell you why. Like, it's the connections to sports is pretty close, especially if you use a skill that's not 100% developed. So if you use that skill all the time and play longer periods of time, it's possible that your body just tells you no, and you hit a wall. You can't do nothing about it.
Did it happen to you?
Yeah, it happened to me a bunch of times. Yeah, when I started to use the swivel technique,
Okay.
and I thought like, oh wow, yeah, I just managed to master that skill. I was very sure about that, and it was middle of an OBSCURA tour. It was just not working anymore. So because I was like, it has to do with muscle fatigue.
And how did you manage to...
There's nothing you can do about it. You need to accept the fact that your body needs rest. So as simple as that. And so for that case, I started to mess around with my trigger settings, and I started to mess around with double strokes, heel toe,
Yeah.
for that reason. And it kind of helped me through that, solve the problem, really. And I was happy to use ankle motion single strokes for that sake. But I couldn't use my swivel technique for a week or so, or like even longer. And then the skill slowly started to come back, just with rest. And you have to accept the fact that your body sometimes needs rest. It doesn't make sense to fight against that. It doesn't make sense. Like, you need rest. That's a very normal thing. What I wanted to say, for that reason, it's always great to have a bunch of different skills you can use if one skill is not working. If there are a lot of different from each other in terms of muscles you use, the better. Right after the tour, I started to work on those three techniques, skills, however you want to call it. I'm not really proficient in using double strokes. I mean, I don't use it for playing fast anyway, because like the way I see it as a tool to play interesting and syncopated patterns. You can build, like you can play the Meshuggah bleed pattern with just using doubles.
Okay. Oh,
For
yeah.
example, you don't need to play like alternating singles.
Okay.
You can also play the hertas, as they call it, with two doubles and one single.
So then they will alternate from right to left.
Right to left, and you play
Damn.
alternate from right to left. But these are patterns you can work with that principle, using double strokes and build interesting patterns. That's at least how I like to see it, and what I think is very interesting about the technique and how you incorporate it in your playing. But it's of course a great way of being able to play fast. But in terms of playing fast, I stick to using singles.
How did you develop a routine to practice blast beats? Since you tell me about George and Derek, I think you started with the classic Stone Killer. But then, were there any more diverse exercises that made you do the next level in blast beats?
No, not really. I mean, it's funny because like with a lot of students, when we sit down and like work on, like, let's say just extreme metals, extreme metal, and the vocabulary we use in extreme metal, I always get the question, how can I develop a fast blast beat? Then I say, practicing a blast beat. It's the most direct way to 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 get what you want. You know what I mean? Because like it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend time on a pad. Of course, it's the foundation, it's the basics, and it's always great. I do it every day. Get back to the basics and work on your technique, do maintenance. But playing blast beats, besides of the function is a different one, because like the right side is split from your left side. It's you voice it differently because you use different instruments. Right hand is playing cymbals, you doing accents. It has to be able to lead, of course, and like playing, like support everything by doing eighth notes, consecutive and consistent eighth notes, or accented eighth notes. Then there is the possibility, and I think there is a creative way of supporting a riff or something by just doing like split up and syncopated patterns, which allows you to develop your coordination as well, because a lot of people can't do broken up eighth notes
Okay.
or playing patterns on their right hand, because they will mess up the pattern between bass drum and snare, so single stroke. And I think that's something that has to be practiced. It's coordination and being able to do what you want with your right hand. So being free on top of that blast beat ostinato. That's
Yeah.
what I recommend. And being able to use, again, it's just a blast beat, but you can use different skills to play a blast beat. There is wrist control, so you get a lot of power, you get a lot of consistency, but still there is, I think, speed limit. I mean, of course, you can stretch that speed limit and like work towards an extreme, but I think there is a level for each technique. And if you, it's the same with foot technique or hand technique. There are different kinds of levels and different kinds of techniques we use at those levels. There is, for example, the combination of wrist control and finger control, and get very even at the turning point. So, for example, you shouldn't really notice the difference in sound when you switch from wrist to finger control, for example.
Okay.
Something very important, especially also in the feet. So the same thing. If you switch from ankle motion to swivel technique or from full leg motion to ankle motion, so I always work on those transition points because those are usually the hardest ones.
What's your approach in creating intricate drum parts? Since I know you use a lot of like weird subdivisions like quintuplets, septuplets, so you really push forward your playing in this way. What's your approach?
It actually comes from like, you know, listening to different kinds of music and being open-minded and picking up information and vocabulary that's originally used in other types of music, you know, other styles. You know, this kind of stuff I have been using with Panzer, and I developed certain skills to play a whole song on a quintuplet basis, for example. But there were like early influences and early like people that did that in the 70s or 80s, like not only bands and Alex, they were also like artists. One of them that I was fascinated by doing so was Vinicola Iuta, Virgil Donati. They use this type of vocabulary. Also, like if you want to name an artist, was Frank Zappa. Yeah,
Sure.
using those things rhythmically. And of course, also classical music. I had the chance of when I was not already 20, I was like about 18, 19, I started to play with a classical percussionist from my area. His name is Martin Grubinger. Also, I got into that style and listening like new classical music. So this also had a huge impact on me and the way I approach rhythm because they played like pieces from a Greek composer called Yannis Xenakis, and he
Okay.
used like polyrhythmic concepts all the time, and like was all over the place, like black pages.
So you barely know any kind of music. Maybe you don't master any kind of music, but you enjoy. I mean, there is.
Yeah. I enjoy. Sometimes I think you have to stay and stick to music you don't understand in the first time. You have to learn, being able to learn that language and being able to understand it. That it's definitely worth like digging deeper. So the more you dig, the more information you get. The cool thing about it is you can get great information everywhere. It doesn't depend on the style. So if I play in a metal band like Obscura or Obsidious, I'm able and I'm allowed to use those skills. I'm allowed uh, to work with this type of vocabulary because we are the composers. We write the music the way we hear it. Um, so if I would play stuff like that on a pop gig, I would get fired, of course, because that's not the way you're supposed to play.
Any plans for the future? I know you have your new metal band Obsidious and any other project you're working with.
That's my main musical outlet. And that's the main thing musically we are working on. We're about to write a new album, stay creative with our music, and that's the main thing. And the rest is the rest of what I'm doing is basically session work. So of course there's some I'm working with other artists Martin Miller, for example, like more rock, and I play with my friends from Germany, the Young brothers, two brothers that like play guitar and bass. It's more modern type of jazz approach.
Okay.
Yeah, you can
Maybe I
watch.
see some videos on
Yeah,
YouTube.
yeah, it's a trio, and we like to work. We've been working as a trio and playing since a couple of years right now.
Okay.
It's very cool. I love that, and I of course I here and there I love to do requests to play as a session player, not only in the studio but live. I'm very open to that. So I besides Obsidious, because that's my main musical outlet, so that's what I do myself to create basically. But I love to play with others and like play live gigs or tours, whatever.
Sebastian, I think the interview is good.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, really, for your time. It was a very big pleasure to be here with you.
you're welcome. Thank
And
you.
see you next time and hope to see you on the road.
Yeah, we'd love to.